This is Chip Maxwell, and you're listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. Is the 4% rule really the gold standard for retirement planning? David says no, and explains why relying on it could leave retirees short. The discussion then moves to fresh tax legislation, smart Roth conversion strategies, and housing market concerns as interest rates climb and affordability slips. David, here's the headline from USA Today. The 4% rule is now the 4.7% rule. That matters for your retirement. Let's review for people what is the 4% rule and then take it from there.
So it's a rule you don't want to follow.
So a lot of people swear by the 4% rule. They consider it the gold standard. No,
well,
not in David Brooks' world.
They need to take into account what's called sequencer returns, which is not brought up by the 4% rule. In fact, we disprove that every day in our conferences. We show what we call rate versus range with our clients.
Okay, even though you don't accept it, would you define for people what the 4% rule is?
Real simple. So
go ahead.
So a financial advisor, Bill Benjen, wrote an article. He was, likes kind of math, and so he wrote an article.
This is like 20 or 30 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's like 1987. So this is a while ago. And for the Journal of Financial Planning. And he just talked about the idea was, hey, if you allocated your assets, and back then it was 50% into long-dated U.S. Treasuries. Chip, you won't want to know the exact number here, but just take a guess. Where do you think 30-year Treasuries, what was the yield on those in 1987, do you think?
I don't know. Was it 4%?
Try 15. 15%.
Okay.
15%. So half your portfolio in a government guaranteed bond paying 15%, half your money in the equity market, basically. And then if you withdrew 4% of the value, in theory, you should never run out of money. The idea is he wanted to make sure your money would last 30 years or longer, a full retirement. Well, that's not hard to do if you're getting 15% in guaranteed rate of return on half your portfolio, is it? However,
everything works if you're getting a 15% return.
Well, let's just flash forward. Let's say you retired in 1987, right? And oh my gosh, do you remember what happened to the equity market in 1987?
No.
We had a one-day drop, Chip, of over 20%. Black Monday, we called it, in 1987 in October. Imagine you retired that year and your portfolio is swimming along. You're up about 8% on the equity side. You're getting paid 15% on the Treasury side. And bam, 20% of your equity portfolio. Now, again, the idea is that other half was supposed to smooth the ride out. So you have time. The equity markets certainly recovered into the 90s. We hit a recession in 1990. Interest rates by this time had already dropped significantly. Those treasuries were now yielding around 7%. You get to 2000, they're yielding about 4%. You get to another 10 years, they were yielding 0. So the bonds actually made money if you bought them because they went up in value. But if you were pulling dollars out, if you were reinvesting the bonds that were maturing, you're reinvesting at significantly lower rates, and you actually would have run out of money in about 17 years using his math. Because the other thing, the 4% rule, you have to inflation adjust how much you pull out. Let's say you retire with $1 million. So the first year, 4% would be $40,000. He's telling you, hey, use that to supplement Social Security. Next year, we got to raise that $40,000 by inflation of, let's say, 3%. It's a little higher than that historically, but we'll use 3 as a nice round number. So that means I got to draw $41,200 the next year. But if your portfolio drops significantly, as it did in 2000, 2001, 2002, over 50% drawdown equities over 3 years, and then you recovered for a couple years, and then you did it again, a 50% drawdown in 2008, 2009, you're not going to make it. In fact, you ran out of money in 17 years. Now he's telling you to up that percentage to 4.7 to start. Why? All because the equity markets have been on a historic run the last 15 years. It's nonsense in my opinion, and I would highly recommend you sit down with a qualified financial professional to show you how you have to have a proactive portfolio that you can actually take a higher withdrawal rate, but you cannot have a stagnant portfolio and accomplish it. And he changes the math inside the portfolio as well.
So the 4% rule is too inflexible, leaves you vulnerable.
It's one of those super generic rules of thumb that can get you in a lot of trouble if you don't understand the mechanisms behind it. And again, it's a lot to cover on the radio here, but this is one of the things literally typically in a first appointment that I used to always cover is explain how the 4% rule worked and why it was flawed math and how you can get around it. But again, that is why we think you should work with competent, experienced professionals.
All roads lead back to one of your favorite mantras, you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
So check with a professional.
Now,
All
we
right.
didn't get into how would that 4% withdrawal be taxed, Chip?
How much time do we have? Yeah. Actually, I want to hit a couple other stories before we run out for this week, David, because you thought these were important enough to share them with the team. I'm looking at a chart that says phase outs for income-based tax provisions, and you thought this chart was good.
Well, yeah, it's a handy chart. I told the advisor, hey, you print this out, have it in your conference room, because it simply shows you with the one big beautiful bill, as it's called, there's a lot of new incentives in the tax code. Child tax credits increased, made permanent. Senior deductions, which are only here for 4 years, but these things can phase out. Charitable gifting starts to phase out. A lot of different phase outs. And if you're watching on YouTube, we actually have it listed on the screen here. And if you want this, we can probably put a link to this where we got it in the YouTube channel in the comments. But this is just showing you where those phase outs apply, because it may change some of your strategic tax planning if you are in fact at least doing any of that, which we do, basically every day for our clients. So very big deal if we have a retired couple that we're actively doing Roth conversions. We have to recalculate the amount of conversions so we get the max benefit of this new $6,000 per senior married couple, $12,000 senior deduction. Basically, that's a $12,000 Roth conversion that could be done for free, right, for the next 4 years. So that's $48,000 you can remove from your IRA and put into your Roth IRA and not pay a penny in tax if you understand how this legislation was written. That is massively important to helping stretch longevity. We just talked about the 4% rule, how to make your money last longer is stop paying so much in taxes. Now you have more real principal that you get to take, because the thing we didn't talk about, the 4% rules, after taxes, most people are getting less than 3. What if you could get the whole 4% or whatever distribution rate we actually tell you can safely withdraw and keep it?
Is this the kind of thing we're going to be dealing with in the webinar that we're going to release later this month about
so absolutely.
tax implications?
Evan, our chief tax strategist and CPA in-house, will cover some of these very facets and how it may tweak the thinking on how you're doing some of that planning. So if you haven't signed up for that webinar, you can. I believe it might be posted on the events page of our website, or you can just reach the office. We can make sure you get signed up.
We'll certainly let folks know, too, once that is released. All right. David, Fed Housing Index showed negative prices for 3 months in a row. Very rare occurrence. Last time, 2011. And we've got a chart going with that. Tell us about the chart and what this data means.
So we're seeing housing prices finally starting to roll over. We've talked about housing for a while. I talked about extensively, I think, on last week's show that, if you have...
the new houses are cheaper than the existing houses, isn't that?
Right. So existing people are going to have to, because there's volume in new houses, right? A big builder here locally, we have Celebrity Homes, Lennar's a massive builder, Toll Brothers,
Buffett
D.R.
made a big
Horton.
investment in Lennar, I think,
Yeah,
right?
he invested in D.R. Horton and Lennar in his latest quarterly filings there, very large investments, he believes that housing is going to get juiced and they're going to start to be able to turn inventory over. The only way that's really going to happen is the house has to become affordable for society. Well, right now, that's a bet that they believe interest rates will go down. However, that's not a certainty. We know the Fed's going to start cutting interest rates literally in about 10 days from this recording. We're going to see the Fed make a Fed cut here in September. But that's the short end of the curve. That does not control interest rates. Interest rates are much more tied to the middle or longer end of the curve. The 10-year is something we want to watch. And the 10-year is basically held steady, even though the market is anticipating all these rate cuts. The reason is you're seeing the back end of the curve rise. Yields are going up on the long run. And not just here, Chip, all across the globe. That is the financial community, those that buy the bonds of all these sovereign nations everywhere, saying, you know what? You guys have a debt problem. We don't think you can maybe even pay your bills. We want more interest if we're going to buy your debt. And the yields are going up. That is scary, because if yields go up, we would see mortgage rates go up. And I have many professionals that think you're going to see 8 to 10% 30-year mortgage rates here within 3 years.
8 to 10%.
I know that sounds crazy, right? My first house was 10.75. That was my first mortgage. And then I remember my wife and we refinanced about 4 years after we bought our home at 7.5 and thought, we struck gold. It was amazing. But that is the type of rate environment that history shows us is normal. Mortgage rates between 7 and 9% are the norm since we've had mortgages in this country.
See, I'm spoiled, I guess. I bought 2 homes in my life, one in 2000 and one in 2016, and both 2-3% interest
Yeah.
rates.
Well, you bought them at the right time. I would tell you, you did. You made out. But here's the problem, though. To make the houses affordable, if interest rates aren't going to drop to 3 or 4%, if we're not going to have sub 4% 30-year mortgage, which I don't think we will, if we're not going to have that, then the price of those existing homes there's over 580,000 of them as of this week for sale, more than buyers, right? Those prices are going to have to drop by 15 to 20% to make the houses even attainable for the people that will have to qualify for those mortgages based on current average wages in America. So it's concerning. And again, this is why you want to have somebody analyze the data. You don't want to panic. Look, I own real estate. I'll continue to own real estate. I want to, so people, one of my friends is like, boy, you're a little doom and gloom on real estate. No, I'm actually pretty excited about the opportunities that will come out.
On real estate.
Yeah, long term, absolutely. But
you've got to be selective. You got to be careful.
Well, and I just tell people, if you're buying a home for shelter, it doesn't really matter. If you're going to live in that home 15, 18 years, are you worried if the price goes down 5% in the near term? Probably not. But if you're trying to buy something and then you're going to flip out of it in the next 3 years, which a lot of people unfortunately thought they could just do as a normal thing, bought a house, wait 3 years, then step up, because they kept getting low interest rates, those days are probably long gone for a while.
Thank you for listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. If you want to learn how to generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, visit retiresmartpodcast.com. And make sure to subscribe to keep up with new episodes every week.